All right, everybody, we're coming to you live right here in West University, y'all. You know, people say, well, man, you wearing all these different colors. Okay, when we out there in, let's say out on the north side, we using purple because purple is a popular color out there because of Phyllis Wheatley. And when we in Third Ward, we using red because red is a popular color of Jack Gates and represent a lot of things in Third Ward. Okay, then when we come to Maryland, it's about blue and white because they're part of this West University clique, or this West University connection to Houston. And then you say, well, when you go out there to Bel Air, you got red because red is the color of the Bel Air Cardinals. And right now we in West University, the home of Rice University. But before it was Rice University, it was Rice Institute. And what can I say about William Marsh Rice? That's the man who sold 1,000 acres to the people, which was the man, Mr. Williams, who started Bel Air. He sold him 1,000 acres. Mr. William Rice had a total of 10,000 acres that they could account for. And he sold 1,000 acres on the other side of that railroad track, what we call Bel Air. And on this side, he kept his other 9,000 plus acres. And eventually, and what he wound up doing, he wound up building an institute out here on his property, out here in West University. And it was called Rice Institute. But by 1960, Rice Institute joined the NCAA, and they became a university. But we got to remember, this is still part of the Jim Crow law, y'all. So even though Rice Institute was a private university, but it was for whites only. Even when they got to be part of the NCAA and got to be a university, it was still part of a white university. They was part of the Southwest Conference. Let me run it down to you, y'all. This is history, y'all. Because, first of all, the Southwest Conference was a conference that the state of Texas built their own conference, which was all white universities. All these universities that I'm naming were white. Quite naturally, let's start off with Rice University, which was once Rice Institute. And then we're going to start out with University of Houston. It was white only. Then we're going to go outside to Dallas, Texas. SMU, predominantly all white. Let's go out there to Texas Tech, out there in Lubbock, all white. Let's go to Baylor, out there in Waco, all white. Let's go to Texas A&M out there in College Station, all white. So they became a Southwest Conference, all white, up until 1964 when Johnson signed the Civil Rights Bill to end all of the segregation. But right now we're talking about Mr. William Marsh Rice, who they named Rice Institute and Rice University after. Every street out here, from Maryland to Bel Air to where we at today, West University, bears Mr. Rice's name. And so much Mr. Rice contributed to Houston, Texas. Where you think the Rice Hotel come from? Come from Mr. Rice. But we're finna get ready to go show you all the beautiful homes they have out here in West University. And I say this because a lot of these people and a lot of this neighborhood of West University used to look like the neighborhood that we were raised up with, over there on Calumet and Live Oak. Well, we used to call it the Hills back in the day when we was in Third Ward. But out here in Rice, what I would say Rice, because Mr. Rice had all this land. And the first somebody to move out here that I knew was a television station in 1960. which was Ktrk TV, and we'll be going everybody. We coming to you live, 3310 Business. Boy, what can I say, man? I am so hyped up to do this history on Ktrk. Channel 13, man. What can I say, man? You know, let's start it out from the beginning of television. You know, all of the people that was born after 1949, we are raised up on television. See, television, the first television station came here in 1949, and it was called KLEE. And the guy couldn't manage to keep it. He couldn't afford to keep to pay the FCC. So William Hobby took over the station and changed the call letters to KPRC. Now, William Hobby had already owned the radio station 950 AM KPRC. He also owned the Houston Post, which was the first newspaper here in Houston. It wasn't the Houston Chronicle, y'all. It was the Houston Post. And it was owned by William Hobby. And William Hobby is who they named Hobby Airport after. We're coming here with some real history, y'all, because I'm so grateful that I can do this. Because Ktrk was in 3rd Ward, well, on the property of University of Houston, but when they moved out here in 1960, Channel 8 took over that studio at University of Houston, and they moved out here at 3310 Business, which West University was still a fairly new community out here, especially when business was concerned. And when the station first started out, it was called KTRH, but they couldn't use that call letter because KTRH had already owned the radio station, plus they didn't own 50% stock in the television station that they was trying to get the FCC license. And some of the people that were responsible for that, the owner of KTRH 740 radio, also the owner of the Houston Chronicle, the president of the Houston Chronicle, and George Roy Harfine, who bought the Astrodome here and the Houston Coke 45 here. At that time, it wasn't no Major League Baseball, and Harfine was trying to invest into communication like William Hobby. So they could not name the TV station in 1954. It took 5 years before ABC could get a network out here in Houston. So in 1954, the brand new network, which was ABC, because NBC and CBS was already established. So the new network was ABC, and that's why they was looking for some affiliates. And the affiliates who came here to represent Houston to buy it, like I say, was George Roy Harfine, the president of KTRH Radio 740, and also the president of the Houston Chronicle. So they couldn't use KTRH. They could use KPRC because William Hobby already owned 100% of the television station and the radio station. So they could use that call letters. But KTRH could not use the call letters, so they had to change the call letters to Ktrk TV. And they started, you have to remember, they was the last network to come on. This was the last station to come on before Channel 26 and Channel 39. We didn't have but 3 major networks coming up in the 50s and the 60s, and that was ABC, which was the last one, CBS, which was the second, NBC was the first. And to see how well they had came up, man. And back when they moved out here in 1960 at 3310 Business, they was in last place in the news department. They hadn't hired Dave Ward. Dave Ward was working at KNUZ with Archie Yancey, Homer Ford, not Homer Ford, that's Joe Ford, and Paul Berlin. And he was doing a heck of a job in the news department at KNUZ. So when they moved out here, they offered Dave Ward to come into television for the first time, to my knowledge. And what did Dave Ward do? He bought this station out of a last place station to a #1 station. And KTRK is the #1 station in the state of Texas, y'all. But just a little history. And when they bought the station out here, and it was always part of ABC affiliate, Site Communication used to own the station before they sold it to Disney. And the good thing about it, like I say, when Dave Ward came here, Dave did so much for not only the city of Houston, him and his wife with Crime Stopper. Even before that, he helped hire the first black news reporter, which was Charles Porter. He helped put women behind the desk, the news desk, because see, that was a man's job, y'all. That was not a female job. But Dave Ward helped orchestrated it. And then he not only did that, but he bought the first black female to sit behind the desk. And that was Diana Fallis. And what can I say about Dave Ward, man? He and his family, or his wife, not only did that for the channel here in Houston, the channel 13 and Ktrk, but also what he did for Houston, man, and helped jumpstart Crime Stopper. But we're talking about West University and the history of Ktrk TV. Because when Dave got here, it was in last place. It was a disgrace. Because if anybody got the news, it's going to happen to KPRC. Number one, KPRC owned the newspaper. Number two, KPRC owned the radio station. Number three, KPRC had connection, and Jack Cato had connection to everything that went down in the city of Houston and HPD and Harris County. He was in everything. From Buster Kern being the county sheriff to Jack Hurd being the county sheriff, all the way to Herman Short being the police chief. He had it, and he was the #1 news reporter for KPRC Channel 2. So that's why they had the asset to all the news. And then what can you say about KHOU with Dan Ruthers? Man, Dan was the man. That's why CBS hired him to sit behind the desk at CBS. Man, but when Dave Ward got here, he not only helped Charles Porter and Diana Fallis, but when Marvin Zindler couldn't get along with Jack Hurd over there in the Harris County Sheriff Department, it was Dave Ward who opened the door for him to come in to Ktrk TV. And what can I say about Marvin? Slime in the Ice Machine, the LaGrange Chicken Ranch. Man, that was the best combination I ever seen. When Marvin was behind the desk, Dave, and you can't forget about Ed Brandon doing the weather. And you sure can't forget about my main man, Mr. Bob Allen. I love him to death like I love Dave Ward. It wouldn't be for Bob Allen going way to Cincinnati to bring Tim Milton down here, because Tim Milton was already a sports director up there in Cincinnati. But he came down here, and oh, how well I'm so grateful he did, because that's how I got my start. Because when Tim Milton came down here from Cincinnati, he bought his cameraman, which was Mike, and that's who taught me how to use a camera. He taught me the fundamentals of a camera, from a wide shot angle to a close-up. Mike helped me to do the thing that I'm doing today. And Tim Milton bought Mike down here as his own personal cameraman from Cincinnati. And you know what? Bob Allen okayed it, and he approved it. And that's how I got started doing what I'm doing in Booley Production, thanks to Mike. And of course, Nitro Arthur Prime. But it's just so good to be here at this #1 station in the state of Texas, y'all. And that's Ktrk TV. And they was the first one to move out here to Southwest. Because when they moved out here in 1960, 10 years later, KPRC moved over there to Southwest Freeway. And only thing that didn't happen, and then when Channel 26 and Fox decided to get them affiliated station down here with KRIV, they moved out here in Southwest. And then when Channel 39 and 26 came in, of course, where they moved? Southwest. But who started it? Ktrk. So KTRK, my hats off to all the people out here at Channel 13 that make this thing happen for us. And like I say, one thing about KTRK, they are never too scared to go in the black community. They are never too afraid to go into the black community, Hispanic community. It don't make no difference. If it's a story that needs to be told and it needs to be on the airwaves, KTRK is on the job.